Greg Page is famous for his role as a yellow wiggle in the children's global phenomenon, The Wiggles. Now, as an actor, a singer and a musician, Greg is also the survivor of cardiac arrest and heart disease. Last year, during a charity concert to raise money for the communities ravaged by the bushfires, Greg suffered a sudden heart attack that nearly claimed his life. But thankfully, Greg survived and he lives to tell his story. Greg has also started a charity called Heartofthenation, and he's here today at the Informer to talk with us. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Now, surviving a heart attack, what was that like?
Look, I guess I think it's important to point out that there's a difference between a heart attack and a cardiac arrest. I think there's a lot of misinformation in the community about that. And I think it's one of the barriers to people really understanding what an issue sudden cardiac arrest is in society. So a heart attack is when you get the blockage in the arteries and you get that reduction in blood flow to the heart. Now, just as you might, if you put a elastic band around your thumb really tight, that'll restrict the blood flow to the thumb and it will start to ache after a while and it might turn blue. That's what happens during a heart attack. Your heart isn't getting fully perfused with blood, so it starts to ache because it's not really getting the amount of blood that it needs to work. That can lead to a fatal problem if it's not dealt with quickly. So that's a heart attack. Cardiac arrest can be caused by a heart attack, but not always. So in my case, it was caused by a heart attack. I had such a massive heart attack that I didn't have any warning signs or symptoms. It just sent my heart straight into cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest is an electrical disruption of the electrical impulses in the heart that tell the heart how to beat properly so that it pumps blood. When those electrical impulses are disrupted, the heart doesn't pump blood. So the effect is pretty much immediate. If your heart's not pumping, your brain is not receiving blood flow, your lungs are not receiving blood flow, so your brain stops working and your lungs stop working. That's why they say with cardiac arrest, if someone's not responding because they can't respond, their brain's not working, and if they're not breathing normally or at all because their lungs aren't working because they're not getting any blood whatsoever, that's when you've got to start the chain of survival. So that's two differences. Heart attack is the restricted flow of blood to the heart that can lead to much more serious problems, including cardiac arrest and death. Cardiac arrest is the electrical problem. So one's plumbing and one's electrical. So for me, it was a plumbing problem that led straight to an electrical problem. And having survived that, it has, it's obviously changed my life because coming out of that, I have started up this charity to create greater awareness about just exactly what I was talking about there, the difference between a heart attack and a cardiac arrest. So cardiac arrest kills around 22,500 Australians every year. 90% do not survive a cardiac arrest. I was 1 in 10.
What was the chain of events, do you think, that led you to survive then, Greg?
Well, the chain of events, very good term to use, it was the chain of survival. So it was the fact that people around me, number one, identified that I wasn't breathing and I wasn't responding. So they called 000 straight away. They also sent for an AED. They started CPR and they kept CPR going until the AED arrived and they were able to shock me with the AED. They are the 4 links in the chain of survival. Quite often we talk about the 3 main ones being call, push, shock. But really those 3 links are dependent on the first link, which is correct identification of somebody being in cardiac arrest and needing the subsequent 3 links in the chain. Now, of course, that was down to the bystanders, but then the ambulance crew turned up and they administered advanced care, which is the next step. They took me to hospital. I got the procedure done where they opened up the blocked artery, and then I had great rehabilitation afterwards. So that's all the links in the chain, pretty much.
Now, you mentioned the AED. They're also commonly known as a defibrillator, aren't they? That's what we're talking about?
Yeah, and look, I call it an AED, and I call it that because that A stands for something very important for people to understand. It stands for automated. And a lot of people, when they hear the word defibrillator, they think about the big devices that they see on medical shows or on drama shows where they've got this big device and the paramedic or the doctor or the nurse gets the paddles and they rub them together and they go clear. And it gives the impression that you can only use that device if you're trained or if you're medically qualified. The amazing thing about an AED, as opposed to a defibrillator, which is a hospital grade piece of equipment, the AED is designed for anyone to use. And that automated, is so important because the device is designed to basically work on its own. All the lay person or bystander has to do is find the power button or turn it on and follow the voice prompts. The people who saved my life with the AED that night had never used one before, and that's despite the fact that one was a cardiac nurse from hospital and the other was a GP. So two medical professionals, but they'd never used an AED before, but they saved a life.
Now, with the AEDs, I've actually had some experience as a former examiner for Royal Lifesaving Society. As you said, they're so easy. Even if you place the pads in the wrong place, it will tell you that the pads are in the wrong place. It will tell you whether it even needs to be switched or whether it will give a shock or not. And it'll also tell you to continue with compressions. Am I right in that, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. They're incredible devices. And not only that, they will tell you if the patient needs to be shocked, and they tell the rescuer when to stand back and not touch the patient so the rescuer doesn't get shocked as well. Now, that serves two purposes. From everything I've read and everything I've seen, nobody has ever died from using an AED on a patient, right? But plenty of patients have died because responders or bystanders have been afraid to try to use the AED. There's stories about paramedics turning up to cardiac arrest events and the AED is there, but nobody's cracked it open to put it on the patient. That's the kind of story that we don't want to hear. We want to hear stories where people have access to an AED, they're confident enough, they're empowered enough to crack it open, put the pads on and try and use it, because the quicker you can use it, the more likely you are to save that person's life.
The statistics for the AEDs are such a stark example of how effective they are. I think it's around 3% success for CPR without one, and it climbs to around 80% success with one. Why aren't they everywhere, Greg?
That's a very good question. Look, the actual stats, they're open for debate in a lot of ways. I don't know that there's any definitive stats, but there is a group of stats or a group of studies that show exactly what you've said. CPR alone cannot restart the heart of somebody who's in ventricular fibrillation, which is probably the most common type of cardiac arrest. CPR just keeps the brain and the organs of the body perfused and keeps the heart in a more viable state so that it can be shocked when that AED arrives. Now, as time goes on, the shockability of the heart deteriorates. So as time goes on, there's less and less chance that that patient is going to be able to be shocked by the AED. So time is so important. Now, as you say, when you get that AED onto somebody within 3 to 5 minutes, there are studies that show the success rate is up around 70% survival. That is phenomenal. Can you imagine if we had an AED within 3 minutes of every person that had a cardiac arrest? The survival rates would skyrocket, because right now, 10% survival rate is so low, because by the time our ambulance crews are arriving, and this is not a slight on our paramedics at all, it's just a fact of life, they cannot get there quickly enough. But what we can do is make sure there are more AEDs out in the community and make sure that people know how to find them and make sure they know that anyone can use it, that it's not a barrier, that you've never used one before. It doesn't matter. Get it on that patient as quickly as you can and you will see survival rates skyrocket.
So Heartofthenation, great charity. What's the charity's objective, Greg?
The objective is to increase survival from sudden cardiac arrest. We've got several initiatives that we are undertaking to try to do that, but our main initiative is one, and I should have my prop ready to go. I'm sorry that I don't. If a business or a workplace or anywhere in the community has an AED inside that the public might otherwise not know about, they can put one of our stickers on their front door or window that says AED inside, so that as you're walking past that business every day, if you go in and out of it, if you're a customer, you see that there is an AED inside the business, because quite often they're out the back in the staff room or in the back dock somewhere where the public don't see it. Now, if somebody goes into cardiac arrest out the front of that business, unless the people inside know that their AED is needed, nobody would know that the AED is there. But that AED could save that person's life. So knowing where your nearest AED is going to be vital in helping to save lives from cardiac arrest.
That's a great point, Greg. It's no different than we have our first aid kit signs everywhere. Now, you basically dropped dead in a workplace. Thankfully, that workplace had it. Do you think all workplaces should have this?
Yeah, look, I do. I've got several thoughts on this topic, but the long and the short of it is, the more AEDs there are out in the community, whether it's workplaces, gyms, sporting fields, the more AEDs, the more lives will be saved. Now, the fact is, 80% of cardiac arrests happen in the home, right? So, and one stat that I've seen from studies shows that 20% that happen out in public, I think it's like 80% of those cardiac arrests are witnessed because there are people around all the time. So there's a higher survivability from that small group. Now, in the home, you do get a lot of what they call unwitnessed cardiac arrest. So that is somebody who'll go into cardiac arrest and nobody knows, because the person might be at home on their own, or they might be upstairs in the bedroom and nobody knows. But from other studies that I've seen, it seems that around 40% of those cardiac arrests that happen in the home are witnessed. So that's still a large proportion, 40% of 80%. So if you have access to an AED for that 40% of the 80%, there could still be a huge increase in survival from cardiac arrest if we can get AEDs in close proximity to homes everywhere.
Yeah, it really seems like a no-brainer, Greg. So life after the Wiggles, can we move on? What's life after the Wiggles apart from the charity been like?
Well, look, to be honest, it pretty much is the charity. You know, I'm only here now today because my life was saved that night. Had I not been the beneficiary of the chain of survival, I would not be sitting here right now talking to you. I would not be here at home with my family. So every day is a bonus day. And I want to try and create more bonus days for more people out there. Now, I'm very fortunate that I get to work from home. I'm with my family pretty much every day, particularly during lockdown. We are with each other all day, but I do sit inside the office here, you know, working on Heartofthenation, as I said, to try and create greater awareness about this very issue, because I know that if we have more awareness about it and more accessibility to AEDs, we can see an increase in survival. So, you know, the fact that I'm here means that hopefully we can have more people there for their families day in, day out.
That's no better purpose in life than that, Greg. This would be a great thing to be taught at school. I know I don't often use the algebra. I often scoot around the English lessons I've tried to have taught to me. But first aid and this sort of stuff, it really should be part of even driver's license, your learner's permit, it should be part of, don't you think?
I agree. And there's been studies from around the world, again, different parts of the world, particularly Seattle. There's the famous, Seattle's always quoted by people in this space about how well they've done to increase their survival from cardiac arrest. A couple of things that they implemented, or a few things. Number one, they had more AEDs publicly accessible throughout the county. They introduced CPR education into schools, and they made CPR mandatory before you get your driver's license. So they have a bit of a saying, don't fall asleep on a park bench in Seattle because you'll wake up with somebody doing CPR on you, which is a bit of a joke. But the point is, it's so well known over there. It's such, you know, it's on everybody's radar. But if you look like you're not responding and not breathing, they'll just start CPR on you straight away. That's how we want people to think. We want people to think, okay, that person is not responding and not breathing. I just go straight into action, like muscle memory. And yes, I agree. Teaching children, particularly at a young age, even though it's a very sensitive topic, teaching them at a young age means it gets absorbed into their psyche and it can stay with them for a lot longer, just as the Wiggles has with kids over the years. So kids that grew up with the Wiggles now, they're in their 20s or maybe even early 30s. the Wiggles and the Wiggles songs are such a part of their psyche and who they are because they were exposed to it at a very young age. And it was a positive experience. Now, teaching kids CPR at a young age could possibly lead to them saving a life. And at very least, if they have to use it, they'll know that they've done everything that they could to achieve a positive outcome.
A great way to finish, Greg. And not just children that have the Wiggles burned into their psyches. As a parent, I've avoided big red cars, hot potatoes and spaghetti ever since. Great to talk to you, Greg, and wish you all the luck with Heartofthenation. Keep us in the loop and let us know what developments as you go along.
Will do. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg.